Hi and welcome to this MVA course on Windows Phone 8.1 Enterprise Mobility Management. During this course today we're going to have a look at the EMM space. We're going to look at such things as mobile device management, which is the ability to take a device, enroll it, make sure that you can deploy policies out to that device and ultimately be able to retire it with remote wipe. We're also going to have a look at mobile application management, which is the ability to go and deploy specific applications out to a device, be they from a sideloading perspective with a line of business app or from the store, so in this case the Windows Store. We're also going to have a look at mobile information or mobile content management, which is the ability to take information and be sure that it's encrypted on a device, be sure that it is actually safe and secure, and that the information that's on that device is exactly what the business wants to be there. I, however, am not going to do all of this on my own. In fact, I'm not going to do very much of it at all inside of this course. Joining me from one of our customer support centres is David. David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks for the intro. My name is David Alessi. I am one of the support topic owners for Windows Phone 8 and 8.1 in the enterprise space. My colleague will be presenting the second half of this presentation on MDM. So essentially what our team does is we not only support our biggest enterprise customers, but we also support the support team so they can do the best job and do what's right for the customer.
So as David mentioned, we're going to be, this is the first part of two module parts for this particular module. First off, we're going to have a look at the enrollment process inside of Windows Phone 8.1. And we're going to have a look at how we enable that enrollment process inside of our enterprise environment. Then in part two, we're actually going to go through using policies and settings and deploying those inside of our environment, deploying the policies and settings out to a particular device. So to start us off, the enrollment process, what's actually involved in that?
So the first step to any EMM, or in the case of this presentation today, MDM solution, is going to be enrollment. So this is when the device not only discovers where the enrollment server is, but establishes a kind of trust that the user gives up some functionality from his device, but is given a lot of really powerful enterprise features that he can then use to be even more productive. So in the first slide, we're going to go over kind of a architectural overview of all the moving parts here. Hopefully this kind of helps you get a picture in your head and demystify this kind of complicated solution. So it all starts on the device. You go into the workplace application under settings. It's on the phone by default. Once there, you specify your credentials, and then the phone uses those credentials to perform an FQDN lookup for an enrollment server to enroll basically UPNs from the one that you specified. So if this fails, the phone will give you an option to manually specify where the enrollment server is located. Another way you can use this is if you have a test environment or a beta environment as well as a production environment. It's likely that only the production is going to have discovery set up. So if you need to enroll into your beta or test environment, you can simply force a failover by typing in some incorrect credentials and then manually specifying the location of your beta or test enrollment server. So once the enrollment server is found, either via the discovery service or via your own manual means, you will authenticate to it with your username and password, of course. Once authenticated, you will start to receive your first certificate. So the two involved in enrollment are the application enrollment token, or AET token, as well as the client or user certificate. So the purpose of these, AET token is a kind of a trust from the device to your environment saying it's okay for you to sideload applications onto the device that aren't going through the normal channels of the Windows Phone store. And the client certificate is not only for communicating via SSL and authentication, but also to identify the device and make sure that it's trusted by your environment. The next step is to get your first bunch of MDM policies and settings. We'll go into how that works a little bit later, but this is the step in the process where those policies come down for the first time. And then finally, you'll get the option to install the company portal and your first applications if there are any deployed at that time. So moving on, the first slide that we showed you was, like I said, infrastructural, but this is kind of the back end workflow of where all the pieces are going. So of course it starts with you, the user, specifying your username, and the discovery service finding the enrollment server. Once it's found, the device is going to ask the enrollment server for some parameters or some instructions of how it wants the enrollment request to be formatted, and also give the device a certificate so your credentials aren't just being passed over an open, clear text. It's going to be over HTTPS or SSL. So you'll get the certificate policy and a certificate. You'll authenticate. And then, like I said earlier, this is the time where you'll get your first set of device management policies and settings, as well as any applications and the company portal.
And speaking of the company portal, this is a great slide that shows us how you actually start to access all of the enrollment features from the Windows Phone itself, and it's all built in.
It's all built in. There are some MDM providers that there are a few more steps. You have to go into the store, get different applications, but today we'll be talking about all Microsoft stuff, all in-house stuff, specifically our Intune solution, along with our System Center Config Manager solution, which is really our most robust and most end-to-end solution. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on for today. So on this slide, you can see kind of what it looks like. So on the left, if you'll start with me, under Settings, there is an application called Workplace. Within Workplace, you'll add an account. And in the next picture, you'll see I've actually forced a manual failover, and I can manually specify manage-beta.contoso.com for my test server. And on the far right, you'll see that I am enrolled in WPFW Intune. So I've shown you pictures, but now I'm going to show you the real deal. Here is a device, which I'm going to enroll. So here you have Windows Phone 8.1. I'm going to go to Settings. Enter the Workplace app, as I said before. So it's all there by default. Add an account down here at the bottom. And I'm going to actually be using my colleague Mike's credentials here.
And just like you said, the screen actually doesn't give you, at this point, the opportunity to manually specify the enrollment server. Obviously, you said that we would just enter some fake details here.
Right.
Which I'm guessing you've just done.
Well, actually, in our case, we don't have this discovery service running. So it's going to fail over, like we said. And here we're going to specify our beta server. So at the top, you can see it is looking for our settings. Hopefully it finds them.
Hopefully it's going to go off again. And is it going to use the email address there as the username to kind of populate that for the next stage of the process automatically?
Yes, it is. So in the case of the discovery service, for example.
There we go.
Yeah, well, you can see it here. It has already populated the email address I specified. So at this point, we've already authenticated to the enrollment server. And now we're going to, over SSL, authenticate to basically the environment. Very secure password. Okay, so now that we have authenticated, it's found our settings, and we've enrolled. So at this point, it's actually an option to install the company app. There are ways to force this on a user, so it silently installs, and we'll show you how to do that later. But for the time being, it is an option, but we will install it today. So as you can see, we are enrolled in WPFW Intune. It's going to have some general information, who we're enrolled as, the server. And this is important down here, actually. So right now, as you can see, we're syncing the account. And the way you would do this manually is this sync button down at the bottom. And the reason that's important is the phone uses pull technology as opposed to push. Push technology is very intensive on the battery because it requires keeping an open connection to the server at all times, always keeping alive, always checking for updates. And so battery life really suffers under this kind of configuration. So what we've done in Windows Phone is, at the time of enrollment, a polling period is specified. The default is 8 hours. It can be changed, but for our purposes, 8 hours is what we typically recommend. It's a scheduled task that runs every 8 hours, checks the server for any updates, and will pull them down at that time.
And it's kind of actually really useful that we're doing that on a poll schedule, because if we did just turn it on push and we did start to suck away the user's battery, nobody would ever want to enroll their devices into the company because, well, they'd suddenly lose all of their battery life just by doing that. So you want to be really careful, I guess, with this to actually make sure that
Absolutely.
we don't over-specify the amount of poll time.
Definitely. There is definitely the temptation to, I want my users to have all the policies right away. And there are ways to do that, but we do recommend, like Simon mentioned, for battery concerns, that you don't get overzealous with the polling period. So now that it's synced for the first time, if you'll take a look at the phone, this is where we would sync manually again. So again, that's how you force a manual sync, and any policies can come down at that time. So the combination of polling as well as this manual sync is a really good solution for most of our customers. So now that we've shown you what enrollment looks like, I'm going to show you the company portal. There it is. As you can see, it's installed.
I like one of those nice little touches on Windows Phone 8.1. It actually tells you that it's a new app as well. Just appears at the bottom there. Very familiar to anybody that's using Windows 8.1 update.
Exactly. So now we are trying to authenticate to the basically where the portal is being hosted. So hopefully it'll go through.
Hopefully in a couple of seconds' time that's going to come back with our company logon details and allow us to do it. I guess you might want to be pulling that schedule down if, for example, as an enterprise admin, you've made a change and you've actually done this in response to some kind of question that maybe has come into the help desk. So you might want, somebody may have raised a call saying, my email's not updated, and then you go away, you look, and you find that you've got some sort of policy change that's not quite right, and then you put something new in place. You can always ask that user to go and refresh their schedule, to go and do that pull synchronization.
Of course. And something important with the company portal is that it's not only just for applications, it supports things like push notifications. You can put like a Yammer feed on there. There's really a lot you can do with Windows 8.1 with the company portal. And there's also a ton of content on helping you develop a company portal that works for you as an organization and has all the features and use that you want. So it looks like this isn't cooperating, but I do have another demo with the company portal already installed. So hopefully this will work a little bit better. And as you can see, something that we didn't mention in the previous demo because we didn't have any policies is that during enrollment, when those policies first come down, you will get a prompt, in this case, for a password, if one is specified at that time. And something to note is there's no way for the user to get around this. He can't hit back out of it. He can't restart the device. There's no way around it. If you specify that the user needs a password, he's going to have to put one in to get through this screen. And actually, as I've been talking about this, we can see, what do you know? Our previous demo is actually working now. So let's go ahead and put in some credentials. Okay, so here we have our very own WPFW logo of sorts. And as you can see, these are all the devices that the user has enrolled already.
And that's a super important point as well, actually, because our idea here around being able to manage the person, not just the device, actually comes through in exactly that. You can see any of the devices that this individual has actually already been enrolled. So their iPad might appear there, for example, or their Windows 8.1 desktop device.
Exactly. And like I've said before, the company portal is for a lot more than just applications. You can put your contact information there for any MDM or EMM specific support needs, so it can cut down help desk volume because your users know exactly who to contact for this type of issue. But for today, primary use for this is going to be for the applications that you can make available to your users to sideload. So none of these are in the store, but you can see they've been made available to this user. And in our case, we will install the Shapes application. And if it's installed, we can show you just how robust it is. So that was actually just a prompt to confirm with the user that, yes, I do really want to allow this app to be sideloaded. And hopefully we'll see it in our... So as you can see, Shapes has now been installed. And like I said earlier, quite robust.
And also really handy if you need to know what shape an ellipse is.
Of course. Right. So that goes over the company portal and enrollment. So now we're going to go back to the slide deck and talk about we've shown you company portal, and we talked about it a little bit. So there are a lot of resources available online for you to help develop your company portal and kind of unlock that functionality, because it's really the face of your organization to an enrolled device. They're going to go there for updates. They're going to go there for IT contact information. If they're ever unsure, it's, you can put updates and use and really make it your own.
Yeah, one of the questions that I've had quite a bit is why do we release this as a sample on MSDN? And the actual answer is it's a sample on MSDN. You're intended to be able to go and build this as your custom line of business application. It is intended to be that first point of contact. You don't just need to go and pick it up and just upload it as is. Although, if you don't have line of business app devs inside of your organization, you can just go and take it and upload it as is. It's ready to go. It's just that it gives you that opportunity to go a little bit further with it.
Exactly. And it's really just so you as an admin or an IT pro can say, what do I need out of this application? And if the base sample functionality is enough for you, that's great. But there is a lot more that you can bring into it to really make it your own and really unlock all that power. So back to the slide deck. We've already talked about company portal. We've already touched on sync. Again, just to reiterate, really important. Default is every 8 hours. It can be changed. This is determined during enrollment. But we recommend not messing too much because it can kill battery life if you are a little bit overzealous. So in the next section, we'll be covering policy and setting configuration. We've talked about enrolling, and you do get some settings during that time. But, of course, there are going to be a lot of times other than enrollment where you're going to want to push it down settings. And we're also going to go over kind of how it works on the back end. So for policy, you can push policies whether you are in a cloud-based or hybrid-based solution. So, again, in Microsoft's case, this is going to be Intune or System Center Config Manager plugged into Intune via the connector role. Both have very similar MDM policy setting configuration. My colleague will show you exactly what that looks like a little bit later. It's not too different from one to another. Where SCCM really shines is the end-to-end, single pane of glass, unified device management strategy or solution where you can manage not only phones, but tablets, desktops, laptops, what have you, all in SCCM, whereas Intune is focused more on it's easy to set up, it's easy to manage, but it doesn't have that robust functionality. So again, as an IT admin, IT pro, you want to say, what does my environment look like? What kind of needs do I have? And what solution best fits what I need? Moving on. So again, we've been talking about policies. How does it work exactly? So on the back end, we're using the Open Mobile Alliance Device Management Protocol. It's open source. It's an industry standard. So that means iOS supports it. Android supports it. Of course, Windows Phone supports it. And also all the MDM solutions, not just Intune and SCCM with Intune, but AirWatch, MobileIron, Good, all those other solutions are all using OMADM. So it's very unified across all these devices. And basically what that means is it's easy to look online and say, I have these kind of devices in my environment. How do I manage them with OMADM? It's all in one place. It's all open source. It's easy to look up. And Mike and I will kind of help you explore that and really unlock the power of this kind of industry standard to manage all types of devices in your environment.
And one of the ways that we actually, you can see that is if you're, say, using, say, AirWatch as your MDM solution, when you go into Workplace to do your enrollment, you actually see the AirWatch logo inside of there because we've built that as a way that they can just directly push down their enrollment process as part of the Workplace environment on a Windows Phone device.
Absolutely. So the OMADM protocol is basically a set of XML. So it's an XML format, specifically SyncML version 1.2 syntax. And what it comprises of is a bunch of CSPs and URIs. So again, a lot of acronyms. A CSP is a configuration service provider. This is something on the device that unlocks and allows the device to be managed. So it unlocks this functionality within the device. For example, the device lock CSP is going to kind of expose the functionality of the device lock nodes, like password set, yes or no. What is the length of a password that can be set? Complex characters, yes or no. Things like that. That's all managed by the CSP. So when the XML arrives on the device, it's going to be handled by an agent or a client. And then that client is going to use the CSP indicated to kind of implement the instructions that you have set server-side. Moving on, we've talked a little bit about OMA-DM being open source and who supports what. So it isn't an industry standard, but that doesn't mean every device and every server supports every CSP. Now, there are a lot of them, and it's going to be pretty much public as to who supports what. As far as Windows Phone is concerned, you need to make sure that if you're using Windows phones in your environment, what CSPs Windows Phone supports, and then what CSPs your MDM solution supports. And it's going to be different based on whether it's iOS, Android, or Windows Phone, and it's going to be different whether it's Intune, AirWatch, MobileIron, what have you. So you need to make sure that whatever you need in your environment, whatever is important to you, that not only do the devices support it, but the MDM supports it as well. And Mike and I will be showing you a little bit later that even though something might not be supported on the MDM server side necessarily, you can still push that XML manually, and we're going to go ahead and show you how to do that. And a final point I'd like to make on policies is it's not just MDM that can push out these kind of policies. Exchange ActiveSync, Intune, MDM, what we've already covered, as well as O365, can all set CSPs, can all set nodes, can all use this kind of syntax. And it can get a little bit confusing as who's pushing what from where. Well, a quick rule is that whatever is the most secure policy is going to win in that case. So if Intune says 6-character password and Exchange ActiveSync says 7, 7 is going to win in that case. But you can also use syncml syntax to kind of get a GET request of what the node contains. It's kind of like a registry value read, right? If you're using, if you're familiar with group policy, for example, it's just setting registry keys. And you can query in a report what is contained in those keys to see what is actually being applied to the device. And that's something that we're going to kind of go into more later. And finally, we've been talking about CSPs, we've been talking about policies. We kind of have an image here on the slide to show you what it looks like for you visual learners to kind of get an idea. So on the right-hand side of the slide, we have kind of our architecture, our infrastructure, enrollment server, MDM server, application content management server. And on the left, we have a device. So depending on whether it's enrollment, whether it's device management, whether it's application deployment or management, there are going to be different clients on the phone that use different CSPs to unlock that functionality and implement the management settings that you dictate on server side. And that wraps it up for this presentation. Mike is going to be going over in the next presentation a little bit more in detail on how to set policies, a little bit more what they look like, and also what syncml and OMA-DM looks like. But today you learned about enrollment, device management, pushing policies, how it all works on the back end, and finally we wrapped it up with OMA-DM and CSPs.
Welcome back to this second MVA video on Windows Phone 8.1 Enterprise Mobility Management. In the first video, we had a look at MDM, Mobile Device Management, and we took a look at setting things up. In this section, we're going to have a look a little bit more at deploying policy, setting those policies and making them land on a device. Joining me to do that is going to be Mike Danowski. Mike, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. If you guys have watched the first section of this, you will have met my cohort, Dave Alessi. I'm going to be going in a little deeper into some demo stuff, show you guys how everything's working on the back end in the SCCM server. Just as David, I'm the support topic owner for Windows Phone out in Las Colinas, Texas. We support our major enterprise customers when they call in with their problems. and issues relating to Windows Phone.
So in this section, we're going to take a look at policy settings configuration. We're going to have a look at asset and user management. And we're also going to take a device and just do something that's probably going to be pretty common to most environments. Unenrollment. What do you do when somebody, for one reason or another, leaves the company, loses a device? How do you do something with that device to retire it from the environment? So without further ado, policy and settings configuration.
Excellent. We're going to jump right into a demo. You guys will be familiar with our emulator here over on the right side of the screen, and I've brought up our SCCM console on the left. When you first get into SCCM, we're not going to cover any configuration on getting the environment up and running. We are going to go through, once it is an existing environment, and how to set some policies. So first things first, we're going to go down into compliance settings here under assets and compliance down in the bottom left. And we're going to find our configuration items. I've made a folder for us today here for our MVA demo. I'm going to start off and create a configuration item in the top left. So we can name this whatever we like. Really in this, we're going to walk through just setting some basic policies and go through the UI on what that's going to look like and talk about what we can do on the Windows Phone. So we're just going to name this something basic. We're going to call this MVA MDM demo. And the next step here is we must ensure that we're clicking that is for a mobile device. Our other options here are Windows or Mac OS X. Those are the devices that we've enabled for deployment, and I can show you that UI as well in a bit. So our description, we can just say this is a test. You can set your categories for searching and filtering. If you're familiar with SCCM, this should not be new. So we're going to look here at the settings that we're going to configure. I, for one, would love to have passwords on my devices. And for awareness, we'll just take a look at all of them.
And that's just going to suck all those policy settings into the wizard, isn't it, for us?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. One quick note, this bottom bit here, configure additional settings that are not in the default setting groups. We'll get into that later. What that really specifies is when we're looking with custom settings, custom URIs. May not make sense now, but we'll definitely go over that in a bit. So we're going to go ahead and we'll go ahead and click that. So this is what the UI is going to look like. Very straightforward. And for our users, we are definitely going to want to put a password. Simon, how many characters would you like?
I'm always a big fan of 16 character pins on devices. No. I think 4 is probably a good place to. Let's stick with 4.
Okay.
Go with 4.
Anything else here you'd like to configure? I guess we'll do.
Yeah, let's set an auto lock
5
policy
minutes
because that's
for a
kind
lock.
of sensible. Let's go with pin.
Pin,
That's
since we
probably
are working
easier.
with mobile devices, and
Yeah.
that just talks about if you're setting up a configuration item that's going to be going down to anything other than a mobile device, something with a keyboard, it might make more sense to do strong password. But for here, we're really thinking about our users. Password quality, a whole bunch of options here. We're going to leave it with not configured. Another thing to note is that in this part of the UI, it's not going to tell you whether or not you're actually creating a setting that's going to work on Windows Phone 8.1. So that's going to come at the end. And that's something to keep in mind when you're going through this, because a lot of the times when someone goes through here the first time, they say, yes, I want all of these settings. But what you might not know is if you set something like disabling the fingerprint reader, that's...
Well, yeah, a Windows Phone device doesn't have a fingerprint reader.
Exactly,
on it. That's an
exactly.
iOS setting, so you start to see these things. But it means that you can define that kind of master policy across the entire environment. One hit, you don't have to be thinking, oh, does this device support this particular feature? You can just set that one master policy.
Exactly, and that also comes in play when you look at when we show the Intune UI later. It looks kind of frighteningly stripped down if it's your first time seeing the Intune policy. There's not as many buttons and levers, but that's kind of when we talk about SCCM as being a full unified device management solution.
Yeah.
We're talking about all of the settings for all of the possible devices that your people are going to be bringing into the environment.
Yeah.
So this looks good for password settings. We're not going to send to there. And okay, this is a huge point. And if you take one lesson away from this, let it be this. always remediate non-compliant settings unless you specifically are doing something that you don't want to remediate. Like if you just want to gather a report on what's currently out there, who's set passwords.
It'd be kind of difficult to put a password policy in place but not have it remediate. That would
Yes.
be kind of pointless, wouldn't it? We want it to actually go and run on the device. We want that device to enforce that password policy.
Exactly. And you can set up different sort of severities for reports when a device doesn't meet these non-compliant settings. We're going to move on. Device, voice dialing, voice assistant. So this is a good example. So voice assistant right now is not applicable to Windows Phone. This is specifically for Siri. So this out of this screen, let's see, what do we want to... I'm going to go ahead and disable copy paste because I don't want my users grabbing email contents and tossing it into their text messaging windows. Let's see, what else do we want to do? We've got personal wallet software while locked, multiplayer gaming. We're actually going to, I think we're good with where we are on this one. Again, remediate non-compliant settings is always, always key. Pop and IMAP email, we're going to leave that. So you can prohibit that so that the user can't configure that through settings. Let's see here. Calendar sync is fine. Custom email account is a big one. If you do have a corporately owned device that you only want your company email on, you know what? Let's go ahead and prohibit that. And that looks pretty good.
I notice you're not actually specifying any kind of email servers to hit at that point. That's a later thing to set, isn't it? That's a different set of settings.
Yes.
This is just saying these things can and can't happen, not versus this is how to set up the device.
Right. So later in our third session, when we talk about mobile information management and content management, we're going to talk about profiles, which are a collection of settings that we're going to push down to these devices or apply to these devices so that when a user enrolls, they don't have to go into emails and accounts and set up all their information. Maybe they don't know where their Exchange server resides. Yeah. So here's a big one that some companies may use and is very important depending on where you are in the world. Application store. So we're going to go ahead just to see what this looks like. We're going to prohibit that. These two are not configured, and so these two are not applicable to the Windows Phone, but we're going to go ahead and disable and prohibit them so I can show you what the UI looks like when we get to one that's not going to fall on the phone. So the rest of these, again, all of this is very, very, very well documented out on TechNet. The MDM white paper for the Windows Phone is actually going to go in really, really in depth on what actually all of these are making. That document specifically, if you're in the business of creating your own MDM server, that's going to be your go-to document. It talks about all the CSPs, very, very in depth. If we went through it today, I promise we'd put you to sleep. So we're going to go through the UI a little more. If you have some, if you can pause, you can take a look at this. If you want to get a closer look at some of what's available, there's also great TechNet documentation out there for what's applicable to what devices.
Yeah.
So we've got some basic internet settings, content rating settings, cloud settings. I'm going to go back to cloud settings here. Microsoft account is a big one. Let's see. Metered connections is also very big. I know in Europe, roaming is a big issue with mobile devices. We can, I believe, once we get through here, turn some of that off. Unsigned file installation. So this is basically going to be whether or not you're going to let your, I guess unsigned applications more so, if you don't want your users to be able to dev unlock the phone and install their own custom line of business apps on the side. Very important for many enterprises out there.
Definitely. You want to maintain the trust inside of your device there, and enabling dev unlock can be a little bit like allowing people to root a phone.
Exactly. We're going to turn off camera. And we'll leave on NFC and Bluetooth for now. Remediate non-compliant settings. Again, let's see, roaming. Here we go. So mobile device management while roaming, email download while roaming, all very important. We're going to turn off data roaming. We probably won't come across that scenario in our emulator here, but that's okay. Storage card encryption, file encryption on the mobile device. This is how you turn on BitLocker. Require email signing. So SMIME is a new security feature that we have in Windows Phone 8.1.
Yep.
So That's where this would be configured. We've got some Wi-Fi communications here, but we're going to go through that in another section. Certificates as well, system security, we've got user account control. As you can see, a lot of these, here we go with fingerprint unlocking. That's my favorite.
Again, not going to be particularly useful for Windows Phone at this point.
Exactly. Let's go ahead and we'll disable it so I can show you guys what that's going to look like. So work folders URI, or URL, data protection, additional settings. So this is my favorite bit. There are certain settings that are going to require XML blobs in order to configure them. The MDM white paper goes over a lot of information on how to actually configure your XML so it's going to work, so you can get the end user experience that you really, really want. We're going to demo that in our next session as well. But for now, I just want to show you guys some of the UI so that you start to get familiar with it. If you go down here to add, you can see a giant list of all of the features that we were just doing through the UI. And so we can stop. I know I'm probably scrolling fast, but if we want to look at unsigned applications, we can see who it's applied to. So Windows Mobile, another key point, Windows Mobile is not Windows Phone 8.
Yeah.
So you will see here we've got Windows Phone Enterprise Feature Pack. So that's going to be Wi-Fi hotspot reporting. You'll see things in here for Windows 8.1. It truly is a unified device management solution. We've got specifically iOS. These are very important, especially with Office out for iPhone now. But we're going to move on from that. If we create a setting, we can actually specify our own settings. So if I want to do something like an allow and deny list, which again, we will be demoing in the next module, actually 2 modules ahead in the mobile application management. We're not specifying a registry value. You'll see here that you have the option to specify an OMA URI. And so what that basically is it's going to be a string, and that is when the policy comes down from the server to the device, that's where it's going to target to make the actual registry change. So this is going to look like, I believe I have one down here. Whoop. So here's the OMA URI. And again, if you're asking yourself, where do I find these OMA URIs? The white paper is going to be your friend, and we will provide a link to that in the notes for this. But you just simply go ahead and paste that in there. Select OK. Check for typos, because any typo in here, if you misspell application,
It's just not going to work.
yes.
Yep.
So now it is added to this great big list. It's nice and easy to find it right here at the top, but a quick way I like to use is just do supported platforms, because the console doesn't necessarily know if it's supported or not. There's a couple ways to get back to this, but we're going to go ahead and select it again. And now you're going to see we get our compliance conditions. So really what we're doing is we're making a logic statement that we're going to talk to the phone, and we're going to say, all right, configuration service provider, we need you to make sure that this set in the registry is going to equal what I want to enter right here. And if it doesn't, we're going to remediate if you have the box clicked. And so here's where it can get confusing. You need to know exactly what the value is going to be. Now, if this was just something like a URI for device lock or a password, you could just put a 1 or a 0 here. But what we really want to focus on is things that require XML blobs. So there's a trick to this, and again, we'll actually go through an application. I'm going to cancel this out just so we don't get too complicated in this session. For more of this, again, it's going to be in the mobile application management section. But my blob has to be configured to 1 line, and you'll see it is a very long line. It can be quite long, actually, depending on how much you're actually specifying. But this is the trick, and if it's not exactly intuitive, but right here you have your logic statement. So the allow deny list, which is just the name, equals the following values. You're going to paste that entire XML line in this area. So it might look like it's not going to fit, but that's where it goes. So we'll go over that in detail. We'll talk about customizing some of those XMLs and actually going out and deploying those to your users in our application management section. So here we go. We've got that all set. We're actually not adding it in here. we haven't set it up correctly. We're going to go over, and now here's where we're going to select our supported platforms so that we can get a nice report on what actually is going to work and what we can expect to fail. So we're deploying to Windows Phone 8 Enterprise Feature Pack. And actually, for fun, let's just do that as well. We're going to click all Windows Phone 8 devices. We're going to hit next, and we're going to see our summary. So this is telling us all of the different configuration item settings that we've set that aren't going to fall down on the Windows Phone 8 8.1 Enterprise Feature Pack.
Yep. So we can see that we can't use our in-app purchases policy that we've just set. We can see that we can't use the configuration for our fingerprint as well.
Exactly. And then on the top here, you can even see it's telling us that these 4 were denied or won't be applicable to the Windows Phone 8. So these 4 features are all new features that we've added in Windows Phone 8.1.
Cool.
Great. So next, you get a nice little summary here of everything that you're pushing out. It's going to say it's working for a bit. I promise you it is.
And that's it. As soon as this is done, this is deployed out to all of the devices that are inside of our environment.
No.
No, not quite. There's another step, right? I knew that was going to come.
So here's our nice new configuration item here, MVA MDM demo. We can see down here that it's just been created and it's just been modified. So if David decides to go in and start messing with settings, I'll know exactly who it was and when it was, which is very handy. So let's go ahead and go to our next part. So now that we have our configuration item, we have to specify a configuration baseline. But before that even, I have to think to myself, what users are we actually going to set this to?
Yeah.
So up here at the top, you can see all of your users, your devices, your user collections, and your device collections. So we're going to set our settings to a user collection. You can see a handful of user collections we have in our environment here, but I want to actually go to users. I'm going to find the user that David enrolled in our previous session, which is Mike Dano. That's me. And I'm going to add the selected item to a new user collection. There's multiple ways you can do this.
Yeah, this is just using user collections inside of ConfigMan. So
Right.
you could go in here and you could be really granular about this. We could set up a collection which goes off and looks for a very particular attribute inside of Active Directory and then puts all of those users into that group. So you could, for example, go along, look at Active Directory, say, hey, everybody in marketing, they have to have 4-character passwords, but everybody in sales has to have a 10-character password.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you can set it up also so that you add a new person and you don't have to go in and specifically add them to the collection. You can
They
set
would
up
just
rules.
automatically.
Auto-populates,
Yeah.
which is fantastic. So back here into the UI, I'm going to leave the comment section empty. It's a pretty small environment we have running here in our test server. I'm going to set a limiting collection of all users. Again, this is all built to be shaped to what you need for your enterprise or small business or however you're planning on using this.
And presumably as well, you want to be making sure that the user collections that you're applying these baselines to are actually also enabled for enrollment into the
Yes.
environment as well.
Yes.
Because you're going to want to make sure that that you can actually apply these baselines to users who are able to enroll their devices.
Right, and good point. Now that I've made that user collection, before we do the configuration, we'll do the configuration baseline and deploy this, and then while we're waiting for it to sort of sync to the cloud, push out to Intune, and then wait for the device to come pull it, we'll look into some of that UI.
Cool.
Great. So we're going to go ahead and create a new configuration baseline. You can see my whole list there of all the configuration baselines I've been toying around with previously. I found it in the past. It's very confusing if you give everything the same name. So I'm going to call this one MDM demo configuration baseline because you'll later be clicking through properties and you'll see, okay, what's the difference between MVA MDM demo, MVA MDM demo, and MVA
MDM
demo? One's a user collection, one's a deployment, and one's a configuration baseline,
Yeah.
and one's a setting sitting inside your configuration item. So
Yeah.
use unique names for this. This isn't a long-term test, so I'm just kind of putting in there what looks good. And configuration data, so you can decide what to add here. We just made a configuration item, so we're going to add a configuration item. This is very cool because you can have different configuration items based on your different user scenarios, and you can create a configuration baseline that combines a few of those.
So you could decide that just your marketing guys, they need a 4-character password. Your sales guys need a 10-character password. But both groups are going to have fingerprint recognition disabled on their device.
Right.
So you'd create one one configuration item that disabled the fingerprint recognition, 2 separate configuration items for each password, but then you'd have 2 different baselines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can also stack baselines, so you can add a baseline to a baseline.
Yeah. Gives you maximum flexibility inside of the environment.
Yeah. So definitely plan. If you're putting that out into an environment, you're going to definitely want to plan before you just go ahead and start naming things, because then you'll look back and say, well, I should have named it this, and my convention should be this. So plan before you start actually deploying this. For test, it's okay. So we're going to create this configuration baseline. Great, we're done, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Wait,
not
what's
quite.
this green button?
Yeah, the big
Okay.
green deploy button. Yeah, anybody that's used to ConfigMan knows that you have to go and then deploy that item, that configuration baseline, out to the collection that we created earlier.
But part of the reason here, and a lot of this is stuff that it might not be necessarily intuitive if you're working at your company and someone says, hey, go ahead and you're going to head up our MDM department, and you were previously the devices and deployment guy who was focusing on imaging and things like that. So there's a couple caveats here. Again, I'm going to go ahead and reiterate to remediate non-compliant settings.
Yep.
Always good to do. And so what this is going to do is we're taking our configuration baseline. We want to specify who it's going to come down to. And we are going to put that on MVM MDM demo, which has one user. That user is going to be Mike Dano, which is me. We're good here on our schedule. Everything looks great. We can have it generate an alert if people aren't complying to it. That would be more if you're running something like a report.
Yeah.
And we're going to go ahead and submit that. And now we're good. So in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and show some of this. I said I wouldn't show some setup stuff, but we're going to show a little bit of setup stuff. Our cloud services. So we have the Intune connector role installed here on our SCCM server. If we go into properties here, we can see, if we go to Windows Phone 8, that we have our portal app. And if we go to general, we can see who is going to be able to enroll. So if you have 100,000 employees and you only want 6,000 of them to be able to enroll in MDM, the rest of them can just use EAS, email, things like that. You can only specify the group that you want. So another that comes into hand with licensing. If you only want so many people, you don't want your licensing to grow out of control, because you're paying per head for this, you can specify just a group of people. We've specified all users and user groups because we're trying to not run into the situation where
where somebody comes along and they can't enroll their device. Yeah,
exactly.
You want them to be in a place where you can do it, and it's by far the easiest thing to do from a demo or a proof of concept point of view.
Exactly. So we've just named our company. We have our orange color scheme, which you may have seen in our previous demo. So that's great.
I guess the only other thing that's worth pointing out there is the extensions for Windows Intune as well.
Yes. So when new extensions become available, they will show up in this extensions for Windows Intune window. As you can see, we have email profile extensions, which came out in March around the same time as the iOS settings. And then we have, which is not live yet when we're talking now, but
it
this
should
is
be by the time we push the push the course out there. So hopefully that's going to be out there. Then they may change a little bit from what you can see on screen right now.
Yeah, so if you see a little bit of wording difference from what you see in our demo, then it's changed in that time. But see, we've got these enabled. Once you enable them, you will have to restart your config manager. And if other people are logged in, you're going to have to kick them out, restart it.
The cool thing, though, is that when you actually enable those extensions, we're actually enabling them for the entire site. So you only have to do this once. Only one admin has to go and do the enable. Then all of the other admins will actually, once they restart their consoles, they'll get the ability to use all of those extensions. So kind of nice from a deployment point of view. It also means that because we're using extensions, should one of the many device manufacturers out there release a new device, we don't have to go and release a new version of Windows Intune or a new version of System Center ConfigMan in order to be able to pick up those settings. You just get access to them through an extension.
Exactly. And so we're all set. We're deployed here on our policy.
Yep.
What I'm going to show you now is we're going to go into Workplace. And so it takes a little bit of time. The infrastructure takes a little bit of time for everything to sync out. So what we're basically doing now is SCCM is pushing this information out to Intune, where it's going to be matched up with your domain. And eventually, when your phone goes async, when that's all available and all synced up, your phone's going to be able to pull that information directly from Intune. David touched on that a bit in our previous section. But really, when you're talking from a management concept between managing from SCCM and Intune, I actually have our Intune window up here. So this is what the Intune environment looks like.
But this is a different tenant, isn't it? This is not the same Windows Intune tenant.
This is the same
Oh,
tenant.
it is? Okay.
Once you set... So we kind of briefly covered on mobile device authorities.
Yeah.
You will see here, if we go to administration, our... Oh, session is timed out. We'll go ahead and get back in here. Mike D. That's me. Oh, we'll sign in. Be working or authenticating. In the meantime, let's go ahead and check to see if we're getting anywhere on our syncing here on WPFW. While it's thinking. Oh, and we are back. Great. So if we go into administration, we can see mobile device management down here on the bottom left. So when you're making your decision, when you're running your POC or setting up for the first time, you're probably going to start with an Intune trial account. So what you're going to do with that is you kind of have two options when you're naming that, and this is kind of a caveat that we've seen in the field, is if it's something you want to use later and you're going to reserve it, so you're going to make it your company name, you don't want to go ahead and set it as Intune as your mobile device management authority if you plan on later using SCCM, and vice versa. You don't want to set it in SCCM so you can kind of toy around with that if you're planning on using Intune when you run in production. Your other option is when you use a trial, just pick a name that you wouldn't mind if it gets lost, run what you need to run, and then just discard all of it, start fresh with your actual production name.
Yeah.
Takes a while for that stuff to reset after.
Yeah. And it can also take the occasional phone call into support to get stuff reset as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so you can see here our mobile device management authority is set to configuration manager. And we're going to go back. I'm going to show you guys the policy here. And so making a policy here, since it's not the whole unified device management, it's a little more streamlined and a little more guided. So we're going to make a mobile device security policy. I'm going to create it. I believe I skipped the naming part. You should probably name it. We're going to set this to all users. And so everything we're doing here, I'm just clicking through the UI. If we can't actually set any of this, since we have set the mobile device management authority as SCCM.
Yeah, none of this is actually going to make any difference, is it?
And so we can go in here and we can edit this policy. And so it's a little, like we said, it's I wouldn't say bare bones, but it's not as feature rich, and it's going to tell you directly where this is going to be applicable. A lot of the settings are carried over; they're going to be in both places. You can not configure it, or you can configure it, and you can specify yes or no. Very cool if you have just a few users, you want to test out MDM, you can go for it. Get right in.
Or if you don't have any config man infrastructure in place already, it might be a good way to go in order to be able to do that. You can just put everything into the cloud and not have to worry about any on-prem server deployment or any of that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So we're going to go ahead and sync this guy and see if we are pulling down our policies. In the meantime, let's talk a little bit about, let's go a little bit further into that discussion with on-prem versus cloud.
Yeah.
So you have options on where your users live. Not where their house is or anything like that, of course. We're talking about the data and their user profile. If you just go straight into Intune trial, you don't set up any DirSync, any ADFS, you're going to be using Azure AD.
Yeah.
One of our new features, or one of our new products out there is Enterprise Mobility Suite.
Yep. EMS. Yep.
Yep. And that actually pairs very nice together for a pretty good MDM. scenario.
Yeah, so EMS actually can take that Active Directory inside of Azure and expand on it. We can turn on things like rights management services. So we can then go, say, into an Office 365 tenant, turn on rights management, and you'll be able to rights management encrypt emails, control access to them, and then that encryption stays with, say, the Word document when it gets placed onto other file storage systems. Also, inside of EMS is licensing for Windows Intune, but we also have the ability to extend the use of Active Directory inside of Azure to third-party applications. So you could, for example, go and connect out to a third-party cloud storage environment. And in fact, actually, to do the sign-on to that third-party environment, they would just use their Active Directory credentials from their on-prem Active Directory, because we'd either see password synchronization happening up to our Azure Active Directory, or we'd see ADFS, in fact, kicking in and allowing people to directly authenticate back with their on-prem Active Directory.
Exactly.
Our policy applied at this point? Or
Doesn't look like it's quite there yet.
Still waiting to go through.
So there is quite a bit going on in the background. So we'll just manually sync a few more times and see if it gets there. Let's head back to the slide deck real quick and make sure that we're kind of covering everything. Asset and user management. So with asset and user management, we kind of touched on that. We're talking about adding and removing users. If you set it up with DirSync, it's very, very easy. You go into your AD console and
add a user,
and they're going to populate across. It might take a little while. Give it some time.
Yeah, there's a few things you need to have populate there. So we've got to obviously have, if we're using this in the unified environment, not only has DirSync got to sync the Active Directory user up into Azure Active Directory, but also the collection inside of ConfigMan has to update from Azure, from your on-prem Active Directory as well, and realize that that user is now a member of whatever collections exist within ConfigMan. So one of the things that you can end up with there is that your DirSync runs by default every 3 hours. Some people have their collections in their ConfigMan sites updating every 24 hours. So it can take that 24 hours before somebody is actually able to enroll, even though they've appeared inside of Azure Active Directory, purely because ConfigMan hasn't finished its update yet. So you have to be a little bit aware of those kind of things kicking in and taking some time.
Exactly. I guess jumping back in here, we can see our devices. We can go in here, and I want to just show you real quick. So here's the device that we're on now here on the right. We can retire and wipe. When you retire and wipe, you get two options. You have wipe the company content and retire the mobile device from Config Manager, or wipe the mobile device and retire it from Config Manager and permanently remove all data.
I kind of consider the second one to be the nuclear option.
Yes.
That's
So this
kind
is
of the way I think about it.
I left my phone in a taxi cab, and yes.
And my company information's on there, but you know what? It's not just my company information. It's actually got my bank account password on it.
Yes.
Hello, Mr. IT guy, can you help me fix this situation? And you know what? IT gets to come to the rescue and actually be able to do the device wipe there. Probably the better option for most people, though, is going to be the first one of these two.
Exactly, because there are the two scenarios where this is the company-issued phone. You start your first day of work, you're handed your phone, and it's set up, and when you bring it home, you're not going to be playing Angry Birds or Flappy Birds on it. You're using it for work. It's going to be pretty locked down. So that device, you might want to do a full wipe. But if you have something like it's your personal phone that you use, you say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sign into this. I heard the guy at the end of the aisle talking about this great app that we offer in our MDM environment, and I really want to use it. It's going to really empower me when I'm out in the field doing my work.
Yep.
And so you can go ahead and enroll. And at that point, you say, you know what, this app isn't that good, and I can't use my camera now. I'm going to go ahead and unenroll.
Yeah.
You can unenroll just like that. It's essentially a selective wipe that's going to remove any company data. So anything that's got put on there through your MDM solution is going to come right off.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting thing here, which is you've got to balance the corporate governance requirements against the functionality that people get.
Exactly.
And I think one of the most compelling ways of doing that is actually by providing them more functionality by enabling them to do enterprise enrollment. So one item of that extra functionality could be that they get access to company apps, which help them to do things far more easily. A really great example inside of Microsoft. If we enroll into the company portal or into the company apps, we actually get given an application which allows us to do our expenses more easily. We can just take a photograph of a receipt and then we can just submit that to the expenses system. That makes my life easier, so I want to be enrolled for that purpose. Also, I don't have to know what particular Exchange server I'm on because that just gets set up for me. That's the kind of value add where we need to start thinking as IT pros around how do we actually empower that value add through a scenario like mobile device management or enterprise mobility management. Is there a way that we can do that? So that's where we kind of come in with the balance on that.
Exactly. Although, of course, you don't have to worry about that if the settings don't sync to the phone. Which it looks like we're running into a bit of an issue over here on the right in our emulator, that it's successfully attempting to connect the server. It'll actually show up with a second item with a timestamp on the last failed connection.
Okay.
If it fails.
Yes, if it fails.
Another thing about that is when you enroll, the errors there are pretty straightforward on exactly what's happening. So you can kind of troubleshoot that yourself or contact your IT folk, and they'll walk you through what to do next. On the left, you guys may have seen me clicking around a bit. I am actually going in to try and see why we are not deploying this. We're going to see what is going on here. So we're going to run a summarization, and we're going to see if we're getting an error or non-compliance, or if it's just, in fact, taking a while.
It could well be that we are just seeing this take a little bit of time to run through and just do the update. So
definitely.
I presume it's this device that we actually want to also do the unenrollment on.
Well, you know what? I came prepared, luckily. I've got this device. Handy tip also, real quick, if any of you guys are using the emulator through Visual Studio and then have the Windows Phone SDK, F12 is unlock and lock. Sometimes you might think that your VM is busted and broken and you have to turn it off and on again, but it's probably just locked. So here you go. Here's your corporate device, Simon. Isn't it great? All these features you can use.
Yeah, I've kind of like to be able to get into my games at that point.
You can't right now.
We'll have a look at that maybe in a later module. Is that the plan with that?
We'll go into that, and you've got. You can't go to the store right now either. But you know what? That's something that you've agreed for your phone.
Yeah.
But maybe you don't necessarily want to do that. You can also see in your list of apps what's disabled. This is handy through. So the games we're actually disabling through an app deny. We're specifying the actual identification for that from the MDM white paper. So the GUID for that. Internet Explorer is through the UI. In the configuration item we just set up, you see we still have a company portal, and we've got a couple line of business apps here. We've got ClickMe and Shapes, which if we look back on the front, you can see they're here, and they work.
Woohoo. That is such a great app.
This one's good too. I like ClickMe.
And
then look at that.
That's neat. Yeah.
And it's version 1. So there we
Version 2 is
go.
going to be awesome.
But they're not as good as all of the games that you have installed, which are still there. They're just disabled.
Yeah.
Also, all of your apps, if the store is disabled, they won't update. But as soon as you get the store re-enabled, you'll be ready to update again. And so it fully shuts off store functionality once you turn that off. But you know what? Let's go ahead and head back to the workplace. We can get into settings. There we are. Let's get into settings. Or maybe you're going on vacation, you want your phone back. Let's go ahead and unenroll. So you saw there I went through settings, workplace, I clicked on our join device, and here we got a little prompt that says if you delete this account, any Office files you've saved or uploaded will be deleted, basically informing you exactly of what the selective wipe is going to be removing. We're going to go ahead and delete it. And what you'll see here is a nice little prompt that says, you know what, we're not going to delete your password, but it's no longer required. So if you want to change it, you can change it.
I think it's kind of nice that it doesn't actually remove the password by default, because it's kind of good to encourage people to start to put a pin lock on their devices.
Exactly. And so we notice a difference here. Now that we've unenrolled, we can use IE again, we can use the store, and we can use games, which is fantastic. So let's jump back to our slides real quick.
Okay, so we just saw the unenrollment in action.
Yep, and we talked a little bit about some of the features that we can turn on and turn off through policy. Some of these, actually some new features in Windows 8.1 I just want to touch on quickly. Allowing and denying user factory reset. So when you actually go into settings and down to about and hit reset, it will give you a nice little message that says, I'm sorry, although you'd love to do this, you can't through the UI. This is intended only for corporately owned devices. This is not something you're going to want to do with your accounting guy who just came in and decided to try and get his email, and now he can't unenroll. Along with that is, he can't factory reset and also can't unenroll. So that's another great new feature that we have that's specifically for someone who wants to issue a bunch of company devices. You can query hardware information, see what kind of devices people are bringing in. You can do software information, so say that you hear that there's some sort of vulnerability in one of your line of business apps that you've signed and sideloaded, people are using it incorrectly. You can go through and run a report and see where all of those apps are, who has them, and pull them out. Or you can remote wipe those devices. Whatever you need to do, we're giving you the tools to go ahead and do what you need fit for your IT environment. So we've done unenrollment, and I believe that is all we have for this section. Again,
Cool.
we've got 2 more sections.
Yep. So we went through the module, we had a look at creating configuration items, turning them into configuration baselines, and then actually going and deploying them to a device by doing deployment. Sadly, didn't run all the way through. I'll have to have a quick look and see if we can work
We
out
can
why.
check back with him.
Yeah, maybe we should check back in on the
Let's see
status of that one for a
let's
second.
see if he's here.
See if
We'll
he's doing
sync him
anything.
while we're kind of...
What else did we look at? We also looked at unenrollment, removing a device from the environment, taking it away, seeing the effect of losing access to the company portal, but also actually regaining access to the things on the device which were locked out by the configuration baselines that we put in place inside of the environment. If you want to see any more about this particular course, go ahead and look at the next video. In the next couple of videos, we're going to have a look specifically at mobile application management. So we're going to take some applications, deploy them. We're going to also create the policies that you just saw in place there on that device where we couldn't get access to the games, couldn't get access to specific applications. So take a look at those next few videos, and also take a look at the resources. Thanks very much for joining us for the video.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome to this MVA course on Windows Phone 8.1 Enterprise Mobility Management. This is Module 3 of the course. In Modules 1 and 2, we had a look at mobile device management. That's the ability to provision settings, control the settings that land on particular devices, do device enrollment, do device unenrollment. In this module and in the next module, we're going to be taking a look at mobile application management. And joining me to do that is David. David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks for the intro. My name is David Alessi. I am one of the support topic owners for Windows Phone 8 and 8.1. My team and I help support our biggest enterprise customers with all of their Windows Phone needs. And today we are going to show you some of the tips and tricks that we've learned supporting our customers. So to hop right into it, do you want to cover the agenda?
Yeah, I'll just go through very quickly. So, part 1, we're going to have a look at the company portal. We're going to have a look at application deployment, and then we're going to have a look at managing the life cycle of those applications. Because as we all know, getting an app out there is one thing, but making sure that we upgrade it, we retire it, we do that in a way which actually suits our users and also suits the needs of IT is something completely different. So that's where we're going to go today. We're going to start off, though, with the company portal.
Right, so the company portal is something we've touched on in our previous modules, but it is really important and key in any mobile application management strategy. So on our first slide, we have kind of a picture of what a company portal looks like. In our case, this is something that we have deployed as a test. There's a lot more you can do with this in your environment. It really just depends on what you need and what kind of functionality you want out of your company portal. For our purposes today, the one we've designed is primarily focused on line of business app deployment, as well as deployment of Windows Phone 8 store apps as well.
And we talked about this a little bit in the first module of this course as well. So we've got the ability to do some device management there. As a user, I can manage my other devices from my Windows Phone. But this is also an MSDN sample, so anybody could go away and actually expand on the application, give it to your line of business application developers, and they could add in, I don't know, maybe a Yammer feed. They could add in any corporate information that seems to be relevant to information inside of the company portal.
Exactly. So you can just use the sample. It's ready to go with mobile application management functionality. But again, as Simon mentioned, there's a lot more you can do with it. It really just depends on what you need as an organization and what functionality is going to be best for you, your users. So moving on to app deployment, there are ways you can be a little bit more have a little bit more control over what is on your devices. So the company portal is really just for suggesting apps and kind of pointing out these are things that you can sideload, these are things you can download from the store. It's kind of more of a recommendation. But there are needs for silently pushing applications to devices, silently uninstalling, as well as updating, things like that. Another quick point that we want to jump into before talking about this kind of silent install, silent uninstall, full EMM solution is through the Windows Phone Store, you can deploy a deep link to an application that you've uploaded to the store yourself. So if you're a member of the App Dev Beta program, you can create an app, publish it to the store, but make it essentially secret. So it's not publicly searchable. No one can look for it on purpose, but you can give specific Microsoft accounts access to download that application. So this is a powerful tool if either A, you have a pretty straightforward deployment, maybe only a couple users, or if you just don't want to bother with the complex infrastructure that's required for the more enterprise-ready functionality. This is a great tool to just get an app out there, pick some users through their MSA accounts that you want to have access to it, and then have them be able to search for and then download that application. So as far as the EMM solution is concerned, once you have SCCM plugged into Intune, that just opens up a whole new world of functionalities and management capabilities. And this pertains to silently pushing apps to a device with no user interaction. So you can select applications that you own, like line of business apps, push them to a device, they'll be installed with the next management cycle. And you can also upgrade those apps and uninstall those apps. Again, all silently, no user interaction. And we'll show you how to do that in a demo a little bit later in this module. So next is the app lifecycle management scenario. So of course, in any application management scenario, you're going to need to figure out how are we going to deploy apps? Is the company portal enough? Do we want to use the App Dev Beta program? Do we need to silently push apps? Again, it's up to you as an IT pro or an IT admin to decide what's good for my organization and what kind of functionality do my users need. Next is going to be inventory. So what devices do I have out there? What deployments do these devices have going to them? And just get an idea of what apps are where, who's running what versions, things like that. Next is updating. So again, version management. If new features are coming out, or even in the case of some kind of security vulnerability in a previous application, you can update that app silently and be able to sleep well at night because you know your applications are secure. Next in the life cycle is uninstallation. So again, if someone moves to a different team, they no longer need their accounting app, but maybe they need something in the finance department. Well, you can uninstall the applications and install the new ones all from your SCCM console. And finally, reporting. So a little bit similar to inventory, but reporting has a lot more granular functionality and is a great tool for complex queries. And again, we'll show you all this in a demo in just a bit. So now we are actually ready for that demo. So I'm going to open up both an emulator that I have here of Windows Phone 8.1 as well as my SCCM console on the left. So a quick note is I have a deployment already, and you might be tempted to, all right, well, I want to uninstall this, delete it, but you just have to note that that's going to delete the deployment so no one else gets the application, but it's not actually going to uninstall anything. So that's just something I want to cover before I even hop into any of this. That's very key. So I actually am going to delete this because I don't need the deployments. Well, it looks like I'm actually getting an error.
Oh, that's because you actually still have an active deployment, so you need to go and kill that deployment first, and then you'll be able to get rid of that as well.
Okay, should work now.
So that's kind of important. It's the same process if you were doing that with any application inside of SCCM or inside of ConfigMan. The whole process there actually makes you really think about it. You have to go and intentionally take away deployment before you take away an app. I've worked in environments in the past where people have just deleted the app, and that can cause one or two things to happen inside of the organisation just as a result of somebody deleting an application like that.
Of course, of course. So in our scenario here, we have a device, if I can swipe properly, that is currently enrolled in our environment. And if you look at our previous modules, you know that you need to look in Workplace to determine that enrollment. So we can see this is the user on this device. So we are going to go ahead and deploy a few applications to this user. So we're going to go to the create application. It's a bit slow, but hopefully it'll get there.
The window just popped up and sucked into the background. There we go.
Sure. Okay. So these are the two packages we can use for Windows Phone. If you own the X app, if this is a line of business application that you have signed and you own, you can use this kind of deployment method. However, if it's just something that you want to make available that's already in the phone store, this is what you would use. So we're going to go ahead and use the X app. Okay, and just a quick note, this is going to have to be a share, or else it will not work. So here we have our application. Some general information about the application that we are uploading into SCCM.
And that information is actually quite important, isn't it? Because that's the information that will appear for the user in the company portal.
Exactly. So whatever you put into this wizard is going to be displayed to the end user through the company portal. So you can leave it as a default, but you can also put in some enhanced information to help your users. So again, this is just creating the application. We'll give it a minute. And there you have it. We have publisher, version, and location, everything like that. So this is ready to be deployed. But before we do that, I also want to show you what it's like to deploy a app package from the store. So we are actually going to need a GUID here. And you might be wondering, well, how do we find a GUID? I can actually show that for you. So you go to windowsphone.com. Once I get the browser working.
One of the great things about using an application which is in the Windows Store that is deep linked is, of course, that you don't have to worry about application lifecycle management with it. You don't have to think about when is the app going to be updated. The application publisher is going to manage all of that. They're going to upload the new version of the app to the store. It's going to end up being approved through the normal application process. And also, Windows Phone is just going to manage the installation back down to the device. So you don't have to worry about version control there. You also don't have to worry about storage. One of the things that can happen is your Windows Phone apps, they can get quite large, particularly if you're storing lots of images in them, as you might be doing inside of some line of business application. As a result of that, all of that storage just is in the Windows Store. You don't need to think about whereabouts that's going to land on your ConfigMan servers.
Of course. So once we've gotten to the website, you're going to pick an application that you want to make available. So in this case, we are Microsoft, so we're going to pick a Microsoft application, the new OneDrive app. And as you can see in the URL, this is actually the GUID here. So we're going to pull that whole thing into SCCM. And again, you can use this for any application that's on the phone.
Yeah, one of the nice ways that I like to use this is when somebody's actually found an app that they've got on their device, they think, hey, that's a really cool app for the company to be using. They could just go onto the phone and share the application, maybe with one of the IT admins, thus giving them the GUID, giving them the URL. They can then go and put into config.man in order to be able to do the publish. Kind of nice, easy way of doing it. The same thing goes though for apps in other stores. So maybe there's an app in the Apple App Store that you want to be publishing. You can do that in exactly the same way. You just have to provide the URL for the app in the store, and then you can push it out to any iOS devices that are enrolled with your config.man or your Windows Intune environment.
Absolutely. So we have our 2 applications, 1 line of business that is internal, and 1 external Windows Phone Store application. So now we're ready to deploy both of those to our test user. So again, under the deployments, we're going to create a new one and point this to the MVA demo user collection. We are going to need to select our distribution points. And this is important as well. So we have the option to install and uninstall. And as I mentioned before, you can silently install and uninstall applications, but you can also just make them available through the store. Well, quick note is that uninstallation, if you select it, it's going to be required. Because if they want to uninstall, they can do it through the UI on their phone anyway. So, but for install, you can do available, which is going to be through the company portal, or required, which is going to be silent. So in this case, we'll do required. We have a few important options here. You can send wake-up packets to the device in case it's asleep. If this is something really important, you might want to do this. And again, some options for metered connections in case you don't want to run up wireless bills. You can also select when it's going to be deployed. And one of the options is as soon as possible. So we're going to select that option.
Of course, if you're running under change control, it's actually really useful to be able to do that and select a very specific point in time. You might not have permission from your organisation to deploy until 3 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. You might have to wait until the Monday or something.
Exactly. And another point is that some software installations require a system restart, which we can select here. And you wouldn't want someone to just have their phone restarted in the middle of a workday, in case they were in a meeting, presentation, or giving an MVA webcast. So again, be careful when you deploy these applications, but SCCM gives you the power to choose when. So we're all set. Just some final details on the app deployment. And if this goes smoothly, we have our first deployment. So again, this Shapes deployment is required. I'm going to go ahead and show you for the OneDrive app what it looks like to deploy to the company portal, just as a suggestion. All right. Again, this we don't need to specify where the content's coming from because it's going to be company portal. And something else to note is this option's here, but we are not going to be able to push an application that we don't own the XApp for. I know it looks like you can, but it's important to note that that's not.
Yeah, and it's important to know the reason why as well. We were talking about this just earlier, and imagine that you've got an app in the Windows Store which you publish, but you actually select the wrong GUID. And instead of deploying an app which is free, you deploy an app which costs $20. And that's deployed out to every single person inside of your organization, but they've got their personal Microsoft account assigned to the phone. So they personally see a charge on their credit card of $20. That would be a really bad thing to do. So we do actually prevent the ability to force an install or do a required install for a deep linked application. And that's across all of the app stores.
Exactly. So we're going to continue clicking through the UI. Again, there are settings that you can use in our example. We're going to try to keep it simple. And deploy the application. So everything is ready to go. Our only step is to force a manual sync on the test device. We went over this in our previous modules. The device is only going to pull every 8 hours by default, but in our case, you can force a manual sync to pull down any new information, and in this case, new applications. So the sync completed, and hopefully we will see some new applications. Unfortunately, we don't. Shapes is not there, but we can check the company portal for OneDrive. So we're going to authenticate to the company portal through our MDM provider as soon as that loads.
It's good to see that we're emulating a real device experience there, where your internet might be a little bit shaky when you're actually out there using random
It's like a real
connections.
phone. You never know what you're getting with your service provider. Okay, we're going to try that one more time.
Okay, that's not looking like it's quite going to get there.
Yeah, so I do believe we have another demo up and running. We'll see if we have our install applications. It's not on this one. Okay, well, I know it's on this one.
Oh, it's just loaded. It's just really slow.
Of course.
Yeah, that's really slow.
Okay. Well, we'll sign in.
Obviously, lots of people connected into our access point around here at the moment. It's obviously causing us
Of course.
slow down. Woohoo! Excellent. We've got our OneDrive
Finally.
app. That's
Yeah,
published
well,
through.
it worked. So here's our application directly from the Windows Phone store. And if we navigate to this application, it's simply just going to be a link to the store.
Yeah.
This is what's called a deep link. It's going to take you there directly and give us the option to install it just like we would if we went to the public store on our own. We'll take a look for our Shapes app, which seems to actually not have come down
showing
yet.
up yet. It could be that the that those files actually haven't uploaded into Windows Intune yet, so it could be just taking its time to just kick through with that as well.
Right, so we'll go ahead and come back to this one later.
Yep.
But we can show some other functionality in the meantime. So as we mentioned earlier, not only can you silently push apps, but you can upgrade them as well, or update. So we have our ClickMe application, and we also have ClickMe version 2. Again, both of these were uploaded into SCCM the same way we did Shapes, so nothing different there. However, the difference comes under Properties. So we're going to go and look at ClickMe version 2. Go to the Supersedence tab. And here you'll see I've created a supersedence rule for the ClickMe application, as well as its new replacement deployment type.
So literally, what we're saying there is that our new deployment type is going to supersede our old one. Always deploy this one. If that application is already installed, then install this application over the top.
Exactly, and I'll just kind of run you through the UI real quick. So we need to actually select the superseded application, which is not showing up because I've already done it here, so I'm going to have to delete the previous dependency chain. So I'm going to go and add a fresh one. And now it's populated because we no longer have a supersedence rule. And we have a few options here. So we can not replace it, but this will just install the new application, ClickMe version 2, without uninstalling the previous one. So we want to make sure we use these options so that they only have the option to use ClickMe version 2. So we're going to deploy this.
And one of the cool things about the supersedence rules is that you could have one application that now combines the functionality that maybe two applications had previously. So one example of that could be that you could be using, say, Microsoft Dynamics, and that now might be taking over from your expenses application, but it also might be taking over from your time carding application, your timesheet application. So you might have two applications previously deployed, now be able to just deploy one application over the top. Application supersedence will just take care of that for you. Remove those old applications, put the new application in place.
Exactly. So, again, this is the same wizard that we've used before to go ahead and deploy our superseded application. All right, so we are going to see if we can force another sync. On this device. And while that's working, I'm going to show a device.
It is always kind of confusing when you bring up a device and you do have a black screen because it's locked.
Right, so again, that is just a lock screen.
Yeah.
And if you hit F12, then it'll be the equivalent of pressing the power button on an actual device. So in this case, we do have the Click Me app silently deployed. This is version 1.0.
Woohoo, click.
Click, click. If you go down to shapes. Not on this one. Okay, so let's take a look and see if this one has performed a sync.
Yay!
All right, so it took a little while, but we finally do have shapes on this device. As you can see, very helpful for our enterprise users.
Yeah, really good for helping them find out what a circle is. Hopefully
Exactly.
they've done that before they've actually joined the organisation.
Precisely.
Otherwise, there might need to be some better vetting criteria in place there.
Okay, so we do have shapes installed, and we are now going to show you what it's like to uninstall it. So again, if we just delete these collections, it's going to prevent this from going out anymore, but it's not going to actually uninstall anything. So we're going to need to deploy the uninstallation. Again, to the same user collection. Our distribution points are actually already added. And we're going to uninstall. Again, uninstall is always required. Just going to select these in case it needs it. And deploy the uninstallation. And given a few minutes, hopefully we will see that Shapes has been uninstalled. Although we are going to force a sync first to pull down those new settings.
Yeah, it's always worth bearing in mind that anything that you do need that sync to happen, and it is going to potentially take some time. So when you're testing, there are things that you do need to think about. We probably saw a delay there while the Shapes package actually got uploaded into Windows Intune, and we probably also saw a couple of little sync delays getting in the way as well. So always worth just bearing that in mind when you are doing testing.
Right, and so that's an important note, is that everything we're doing here, it's a little hard to do it all live, because not only is it creating it on SCCM, but then it's syncing it up to the cloud into Intune, and Intune is actually the one pushing out those policies, pushing out these applications. And a quick point to note there is that even if there's something that happens on your on-prem environment, like service outage, or maybe the server has to go down for maintenance, or anything like that, Intune is going to continue managing your devices based on its last sync with System Center Config Manager. So you're not going to be completely in the dark if you need to restart the server, for example. Anyone who tries to initiate an enrollment or a sync at that time will still sync to Intune and get any policies that are on the Intune service at that time.
And that's kind of cool because say your internet connection goes down, everything's going to be running. Those people who have their mobile devices that are actually enrolled or going to be enrolled with Windows Intune, they actually stay live. They work all the time. That's the idea of an always-on internet-connected device that's in your pocket. So it's good that we support that in that way. And it's kind of one of the interesting things to note when you look at other solutions which maybe don't operate in that hybrid way. They can't quite cope with as many things as we can with Intune and ConfigMan working together.
Exactly. So again, we're just waiting for this to sync down to our device. And hopefully it will be soon. Although it is still there. And again, as you mentioned, this does take time. So
yeah, it could well be that we hit the sync button on the phone before everything had actually synced up to Windows Intune, because that's obviously going to take a couple of seconds to do that sync as well.
Absolutely. So there's the sync between SCCM and Intune, and there's also the sync between the device and Intune. So
yeah, you get yourself into that little race condition, and it can be a little bit annoying.
Okay, so we'll give it one final check. Still there, but we assure you that once this does sync, it does work. It will uninstall. So we haven't been able to get it to work right now. Maybe later in the module we'll be able to show you this device with it actually uninstalled, but just time permitting, right now it's just taking a little bit longer to sync. So that wraps up our demo for today. Today in our module you've learned about not only deploying applications to devices, but also upgrading and uninstalling them. And with all these tools, not only through SCCM, but also through the company portal and the App Dev Beta program, you have a lot of tools as an IT admin or an IT pro to manage your devices and manage your applications.